Well, the crimes were very bizarre. Usually in a mass murder, some person of rather low intellect flips out and murders 10 or 12 or 15 people. Here, when the murders first took place, they called them the Tate murders. Everyone called them the Tate murders because of Sharon Tate. Then Manson appears on the scene, and he's so, whatever the word, charismatic, unusual, colorful, that he upstaged the victims. It became the Manson case. I mean, here you have this little guru, 5 feet 2 inches tall, gathers around him a young bunch of kids from average American families. You'd never expect them to be mass murderers. Convinces them that he's a second coming of Christ and the devil. Ultimately gets them to kill total strangers for him at his command. I mean, if you look at everything in the amalgam, this is an extremely bizarre, strange case.
One thing that you will hardly ever see is the murder of an 8.5-month pregnant woman. And not only was Sharon Tate stabbed, but while she was still alive, she was hung from the rafters in her living room. That's something that you can never get over. That's one of the worst things I've seen as a prosecutor.
I would describe Manson as an instrument of the evil supernatural. The crimes are just sort of the fruit of the tree. The crimes are just the part you can see. And they're not the most, although they're the most tragic consequences interpersonally, they're not the most, what do you say, the most threatening part of the situation. The most threatening part is what causes that, you know, the destruction. And what we saw was the destruction. But that's not as important as what caused it.
Historians in the United States, a lot of them do attribute the demise of the generation of the 60s to the Tate LaBianca murders and the Manson family, and certainly the hippies got terrible publicity from Manson and the family, and I think it did hasten their demise. Before, they were kind of just druggies, free spirit, throwing flowers around, taking their clothes off, free sex, and stuff like that. But then after the Tate LaBianca murders, people became genuinely afraid of hippies, which was misguided, but that happened.
I told you, and I'll tell you again, I did not break the law. I can do anything I want and never break the law. I did not break the law. Is it registered? It's the same thing Jesus Christ told Pilate, man. He said, you're blaming me for your problems. You're trying to put the blame over on me, and it doesn't fit. I'm not Richard Milhouse Nixon. I'm Charles Millis Manson.
There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend, the end.
It's as if there was an expectation of an apocalypse and a series of dress rehearsals for it. There was a sense of doom in the air, and a good deal of that had to do with the Vietnam War, the polarization in the country over the Vietnam War and over drugs and the drug culture. Overall, there was a sense of anticipation, almost a hunger for an end. And the culture was full of intimations of ending. Jim Morrison's song, The End, might be taken as representative of that mood.
Father, yes, son, I want to kill you. Mother, I want to.
Leslie said, yeah, I killed her. And he said, why did you kill her? I said, I killed her to stop the war. I said, what did you think about when you killed her? I said, well, I said, at least you won't be sending your kids to war. Why don't we do it in the road? And then all these kids are out here doing it in the road, you dig? And then you're singing all that stuff and saying, well, it's all Charlie's fault. Hey, man, I didn't write the songs. That's not my generation. My generation's Bing Crosby, man. I'm not the generation of the Beatles.
They didn't want to face the fact that their products, their children of the system, would do this. They didn't want to hear our reasons, which was really an expression of why the young were totally I wouldn't even use the word satisfied. We were alienated from our culture. So then you have an ex-con with no education. Who would be better to blame for the behavior of America's own children? So even though during the trials, the defendants, the female defendants, were very willing and capable of saying why they killed the people that were killed. Each woman had her reason for doing what they did. Say if I had been there in body, then my emphasis would have been maybe different. They didn't want to hear it. They made Manson the culprit, the bad guy, the demonic manipulator of these poor middle class, upper middle class children. They said that he wanted power and that he wanted to be a star in music, which is such baloney.
Thousands of demonstrators opposed to the Vietnam War assembled in the nation's capital for a mass protest.
In the summer of '69, men landed on the moon. A week later were the Manson murders, and a week later was Woodstock. And then, in that November of '69, was the biggest anti-war demonstration that had ever happened in the United States. Now, I'm sure there was violence at that demonstration. It was cops beating demonstrators. Then the U.S., I think the following year, under Nixon, U.S. invaded Cambodia. I think 250,000 Cambodian people were killed. There was a humongous demonstration in Washington, where again, demonstrators really got beat up. But there was also escalating violence within the movement. The way that I understand it is that we kept demonstrating against the war. We kept trying to